That's the story of his life that his face told. It was the story of a perv in the making, the story of a perv on the make. And the story was true. He was always caressing between his tits when he talked to women and making girls who wore spandex tights sit in front during sit-ups and leg stretches. It was all there in the mouth. Its top lip had a pointy edge. Its word-forming movements made it look like he was chewing food that he thought was gross, but wouldn't say it was gross because it was impolite. But he wanted you to know it was gross, so he showed you. Like the food was so bad he couldn't hide the ugliness of his own mouth actions, as you were supposed to admire how polite he was for not saying anything. I hated him. And that's not just an expression. I hated him the way the tongues of smart girls prefer bittersweet chocolate to milk. I hated him the way Jews endangered Jews and burning matter grabs oxygen. I hated him from the moment I met him, and at the moment I met him, it was as if I'd always hated him. I hated him the way he hated me. Helplessly I hated him, without volition, and it was true that there were others as despicable as Desorme, even within the walls of Aptokisik. But I had to learn to hate those others. They had to teach me how to hate them. Desorme was the only person I ever hated a priori. Our enmity was mystical. Miss Pinge told me Brodsky was in a meeting. She said I'd have to wait. I was already waiting, but what she meant was I didn't have to wait on my feet. To get that across, she stuck out her pointer and jabbed it back and forth. The jabbing was called Emanuel Lieberman had long ago taught me to call blinker action. That label referred to the orange blinkers that were mounted on the tops of construction horses. The horse showed you where it was you shouldn't go, and the blinker showed you the horse, i.e., it showed you a showing. The jabbing of the finger was a blinker action because it was a pointing at a pointing. It pointed at how the finger was pointing at the three fake oak waiting chairs next to the door. I didn't like it when people blinkered for me. It seemed condescending, but I did like Miss Pinge, so I decided I'd wait just 3, not 5, count before I revolved and went to the chairs. Before I'd even counted to 2, though, something flat sailed over my shoulder, then landed with a clap on Miss Pinge's desk. A wooden bathroom pass the size of a textbook. I was nice to give you that pass, Pinge said. It would have been nice for you not to throw it at me. I threw it on the blotter, said Eliza June Watermark. No one called her Eliza. They all called her June. I'd seen June around, but never up close. She was flat, but so pretty. She sat before I did, and not in the middle chair. I didn't know if I should sit next to her or sit so a chair was empty between us, so I tried to read her face. But I couldn't read her face because she wasn't bat mitzvahed yet. The stories wouldn't tell. They weren't available. I did a quick eeny-meeny with my chin, and the words inside my head so no one would know I landed on sit with the chair between us. Then I knew I didn't want that. So I sat down next to her and asked why she was there. She said she was talking in Spanish. I said, that's racist. June said, Spanish, class. There were 3 slim gaps between the teeth in her top row. She whispered, next stop, Frontier Motel. Next stop, Frontier Motel was the first part of a rhyme people said to me on the bus, right before I'd get dropped off at the Frontier Motel. The rest of the rhyme was, the place where Gurian's fat black dad who fell dwells. They thought I lived at the Frontier Motel, but I only got picked up and dropped off there. I never knew what to do when I'd hear the rhyme because the guy they called my black dad was the motel owner. Flowers, a 300-pound bachelor hoodoo man, with silver-shot dreadlocks and a chrome-knobbed walking cane, who'd written 4 novels he said he could cast spells. He said I shouldn't read them, not because of the spells, but because he was my teacher, and his books would interfere. So I didn't read them, because he was my teacher and my father's old friend. He was helping me to write my third work of scripture, i.e., he was helping me out with this work of scripture, the instructions, although at the time I hadn't known its title, let alone its true substance. At the time, all I know was that it would be different from my first two scriptures, the story of stories and Opan, which I hadn't needed help from anyone with at all, since they were exclusively concerned with my people, who I already knew how to speak to and about. My people, when I'd written those first two scriptures, were the only people I knew. Apart from forbidding me to read his 4 novels, though, the only thing Flowers ever forbade was for me to portray him as a wise old black man who gave life lessons to an Israelite boy, part lost tribe or not, because, he said, that would signify wrong, and signifying was important to him, and since he wasn't some kind of zealous forbidder, I knew it should be important to me. And that was the reason I didn't know what to do when people called him my black dad who fell. The first thing I'd think to do was violence, because they were making fun of him. But if I did violence, then they could think I was doing violence because they called a black man my dad, and that it made me ashamed. So violence would signify wrong. Plus, I didn't know who they were exactly, just that they sat up front with the band kids. They might have even been the band kids. So I didn't do anything to them at all. Instead, I'd tell Flowers, and he'd give me a book that was by someone else, or sometimes a root he'd tell me to chew. The roots all tasted like chalk. June didn't say the black guy part of the bus rhyme, but I was being nice to her, so it was suck of her to say any of it. I didn't even know how she knew the rhyme. She wasn't on my bus. She sneezed after she said it, though. And after she sneezed, I said, God bless you. I didn't really want to be mean to her anyway. DeSormy kept trying to talk to Miss Pinge while she typed. So, he said. Miss Pinge shrugged, meaning, so what? He said, I guess you're recording attendance. Miss Pinge nodded, meaning, yes, already. I see you've got a system, DeSormy said. You just sort of bring up the name of an absent kid on your spreadsheet there. Oh, look at that. You don't even have to type the whole name. You just sort of type the first couple letters of the last name. And then there's a box pop up you can select from. I see. Sometimes it's quicker to just type the whole name in, so you don't have to move your hand off the home row of the keyboard. To use the mouse or the arrow pad. There's a couple systems there, huh? The system you're using, like in the computer, then there's the system you're using of your own. If the kid's last name is Yamowitz, wow, you're already in the Y's and it's barely third period. As I was saying, if the kid's name is Yamowitz, what a crappy name. I see you just sort of type in YA and hit enter because there aren't any other kids with last names that start with YA in the box, and you know that. So you just hit enter, and there's the kid's file. And then you hit Shift-A, absent, on the record. There you go. I can respect your system. I do respect your system. I am Luca Brasi, and you are Don Vito Corleone. And I am at your daughter's wedding, and your daughter's wedding is the system you're using. I like it. You know what I mean? I thought, if history's taught us anything, it's that any man can be killed. That's from part 2. Miss Pinge stopped typing and tilted her head, implying, please go away, we're on DeSormy. But DeSormy thought it meant, please continue, you interesting gym teacher. He turned around and saw me watching. Then he made his eyes wide at June and thumbed air at me. Thinking it meant, look at this intermittently disordered exploder who does not attend and is hyper and who thinks you want to sit next to him when you really want is to sit in my lap. He ran the thumb up and down his cleavage. Then he winked at June and turned back to Miss Pinge. He said, I bet there used to be an old system where you didn't have those pop-up boxes. You had to type the entire name in. How fast our technology moves. Geez, look at all those absents. Miss Pinge didn't look. Desormy said, what I mean is, there's a whole lot of absence you got there. Then he said, got a good heat, Jim. He pretended to scratch his arm so he could flex it. And then he left the CAS, CASS, on the desk, and then he left. I hate that perv, I said to June. She said, me too. Yeah? I said. June made the noise, Ch, as if to mean, that was a useless thing to say, Gurion. Why you just asked me was not a real question. What you just asked me is not a real question. I said, Ch. It sounded inauthentic, and I tried to ignore. It was hard for me to ignore people, especially pretty ones. It was hard to ignore noises, too. Call Me Sandy said the same thing as my mom said about it. They said that to be a good ignorer, you had to concentrate on another thing, because if you just concentrated on ignoring what you were supposed to ignore, then you wouldn't really be ignoring what you were supposed to ignore, because you'd been thinking about ignoring it, which was just another way of thinking about it. So I concentrated on the face of Miss Pinge instead of June. It was not as fun as concentrating on the face of June. June was pretty and also hot. Miss Pinge was hot, but she wasn't pretty. It's the faces she made that were hot. But the face that she had when she was not making a face was not pretty. It was beat-looking, her resting face. When she was my age, she got her period early, and her father dragged her in front of the mirror in her pajamas. He forced her to look into it and say, you are an ugly girl, and I hate you. The face she made in the mirror acted powerfully on the bones and muscles of her resting face, so that now it was a hint of the mirror face. Certain kinds of men, on seeing the hint, would try to seduce her in hopes that once they'd gotten her naked, they could say something cruel to her and thereby elicit that original face she'd made for her father. Certain kinds of men, like Ron Desormy. What a name. What a pervy name. What a perfect name for a perv like him. It could even be verb like pasteurize. I thought it could be. No, it will be. I thought from now on, Desormy equals perv of the world. And Ron Desormy will, for a while, be an acceptable, however overly formal, variant in the vein of irregardless. Then become archaic, whereas sorn and desorn, the slang of tomorrow, will eventually dominate, rendering desormiate itself the over-formal variant. At that I was tapped, though. I'd killed about a minute, but it felt like 20. On the June side, my neck ached from fighting my head. I let my head turn and said, here's the new adjective you didn't know you asked for. Miss Pinge said, shh. I whispered, June-ish. Easy on the eyes, but June cut me off. She said, you need to shave yourself. A couple people had told me that, but when I looked in the mirror, I could not see what they were talking about. There were no hairs on my face. I looked very hard every day. I wanted big sideburns. Where? I said. June said, ugh. Then she touched me near the area where my apple would obtrude if I grew up to have the neck of my father. And also she touched me right above that, which was the bottom of my chin, which was a part of my head. But it didn't make me dangerous to get touched there at that time. It made me want to hug her in a standing position and nose her in the hair. I wanted to kiss her fingers too. They were cool on my skin, and I thought they would have a strawberry taste. I was sure that her hair would have a strawberry smell. The hair was red, all kinds of red, and I noticed on her wrist she had a pink freckle, very light, shaped like a Hebrew character that Reading Rainbow Eric doesn't know. I had two like it, one on each thumb knuck, but mine were as black as felon tattoos, and under 2 layers of waterproof makeup my mom made me apply every morning to hide them. I was going to rub off the makeup right there and show June the freckles. But exit laughter rumbled behind Brodsky's door. The laughter was the sound of the Boystar family. And once the door opened and Brodsky emerged, I couldn't start talking without getting us in trouble. And I worried that if I just rubbed off the makeup to reveal her the letters without the word, June might feel creeped. Better, I decided to show her later. A document. Name: Graham Ben Judah Maccabee. Grade 5. Homeroom, The Cage. Date of detention, 9/22/2006. Complaint against student. From Complaint Against Student sheet. Fight in the hallway with Kyle McElroy. B Hall. Passing period, 2nd to 3rd. 9/19/06. Mr. Novi. Step 4. Assignment. Write a letter to yourself in which you explain 1. Why you were at Step 4 in after-school detention. 2. What you could do in order to avoid Step 4, receiving after-school detention, in the future. 3. What you have learned from being at Step 4 in after-school detention. 4. What you have learned from writing this letter to yourself. Include a title, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. This letter will be collected at the end of after-school detention. This letter will be stored in your permanent file. This is Reading Rainbow Eric saying that what follows is no doubt that letter.